Welcome to Takes on Talent, an internal mini-series from Higher Learning by MSH. This isn't your typical podcast on business full of buzzwords or sanitized leadership takes. These are going to be real conversations with people who are in the foxhole, dealing with talent and talent issues on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes it's going to be sharp and incisive. Sometimes it might be a little bit sideways. But if you want to hear everything that's going on when it comes to talent, whether it be current events, what's in the news, or just trends that we see, this is the place to be. It's messy, it's honest. It's what happens when people in the hiring world stop filtering and start saying what they actually think. So if you're here for polished panels and LinkedIn platitudes, this is probably the wrong place. This is Takes on Talent, brought to you by MSH Talent Solutions and Aeon Hire. Friends, Romans, countrymen, welcome to another episode, not of Higher Learning. We are doing Takes on Talent, and I am your host, Oz Rashid. But we're going to talk about something much more broad than just talent today. We're going to talk about technology, artificial intelligence, innovation, everything that's going on right now. And today we are joined by a very special guest and a longtime friend of myself. We're joined by Ryan Lee. He is now the founder and CEO of Trident Advisors, where he helps organizations accelerate AI-driven transformation and build intelligent workflow automation into the core of how they operate. He's one of the few practitioners in the space who has lived both sides of the table, shipping mission-critical enterprise systems at scale, and now advising leaders on how to move fast without breaking what matters. Now, Ryan is also one of the smartest people I know. I've had many great conversations with him in the past, so I invited him to come on the show because we want to talk about what's going on in AI right now. Welcome, Ryan. How you doing, bud?
I'm good. Very flattering introduction. I hope I live up to it.
I have no doubt that you will, brother. Every time I walk away from our conversations, I'm always thinking and percolating on what we talked about. So I wanted to get it on camera and recording here. Let's jump into it. So let's start here, Ryan. I want, besides what you do as the CEO of Trident Advisors, you've got a long and illustrious past and experience in technology. So tell us a little bit about yourself, both historically, and then I do want to dive in a little bit deeper into what you're doing with Trident Advisors.
Yeah, I'll go in the Wayback Machine. I really did start my professional career with ADT Security. Cut my teeth in building, very large payment billing systems and account management platforms for them. That kind of was the foundation of what I did. Moved over to Visa, really kind of replicated what I did for ADT, and then eventually to Apple. Was recruited there to help them launch Apple Pay. And I was one of the first, I believe, 3 people when they were, still formulating the plan, was part of that product leadership team. And really at the end of the day, you kind of have a fork in the road when you work at Apple. You decide, are you going to stay and retire in place? Or are you going to go out and do startups? So I kind of did the crazy thing. I jumped into a couple startups, first a logistics startup, then I moved over to a payment startup as chief product officer. And that was where I really heard a lot of problems around marketplaces. And it really piqued my interest. Obviously, I think everybody understands marketplace economics can be phenomenal, but the flywheel is really hard to create. And so I worked with a couple of gentlemen that I knew in my previous startup to launch a company called Nautical, where we built this marketplace platform. And spent 3 or 4 years getting that company off the ground, exited that, and I started Trident. And Trident really was at the intersection of, these businesses, the marketplaces, and other organizations that I had helped in the past, really figuring out how to adopt AI and weave it into the fabric of how they do business. And, Oz, better than I do, you got to start with people.
100%. Now, a couple of things here. You mentioned that you started your career at ADT. I started my career at ADT. We both have a lot of friends who have gone to have a lot of success who started their career at ADT. Who knew that this organization was such a springboard and hotbed for talent? Maybe it's something in the water cooler. Maybe it's in the way they identify young potential. I don't know, but that's an interesting similarity that we have. Apple Pay, I've heard of it. Yeah, kind of use that a lot. In fact, I got to blame you. My 14-year-old daughter and 12-year-old daughter are constantly asking me to send them money through Apple Pay. So that's actually not been a great thing for my pocketbook. So I'm both titillated by what you built, but also gotta say, man, that's not been the best thing for my my bank account. And then the last thing is, like you said, coming down to people. And marketplaces is something that really fascinates me, bringing platforms together, bringing things together, building the end-to-end connection point of where a buyer or a seller or a good and somebody who wants to purchase the whatever it may be. Yeah, you're right. The economics of it can be really, really fascinating. And I read a book called Platform Revolution that I know you read too. Um,
Yep.
that flywheel is the key thing though, man, because a lot of people can say, I'm trying to be the end to end, piece of this. And we've talked about it from a talent perspective and what we can do from that space, but it's not as easy as it sounds. But then again, nothing worth having it really is. So that's what I love. Thank you for a little bit about that background. Now let's get into the AI aspect here, because I know you and I have
Yeah.
talked about how AI is like the invention of the computer, which is obviously a very important invention, and the internet. And that's one that I
Yeah.
draw a lot of parallels to. I'm interested, from your perspective, what happened with those technology introductions that you think is likely to be similar with AI? And then maybe what's different? Because a lot of people want to say, oh, this is completely different and unique. And there is some truth to that too. So can you kind of give us both sides of that equation?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a parallel there, Oz. If you really think about what I coin internet native companies that popped up, at the dawn of the internet era, they eclipsed organizations that were darlings and behemoths of their time. If we really think about the incumbent marketplace that existed, it was Sears. Sears was the greatest drop shipper in the world. My grandparents dropped a catalog on my desk and said, "Hey, Ryan, circle the things you want." Magically, stuff showed up during Christmas. They were eminently qualified to become that marketplace. And then, of course, we know Amazon popped up and within a decade, tripled the value of Walmart, which was the largest retailer on earth at the time. And of course, gained that distinction. I think there's another company that, you and I definitely did. We have a bit of gray hair. Blockbuster. I mean, don't you remember perusing the aisles on Friday night, like eagerly looking for the new releases and trying to figure out what we were going to do? And then this internet native company, Netflix, pops up. And, Blockbuster just failed to adopt it and really lean in and go down that path. And now there's literally only one Blockbuster. I don't even know if it's, real, but it exists somewhere, I think in Minnesota. And that company's all but died. And then lastly, one in your backyard, you're in South Florida, Motorola. Motorola was the king of cell phones and communications and telecom. They were eminently qualified to build that internet native device that we could have used. And, of course, Apple pops up, builds the, iPhone. It's an internet native device, and it literally kills Motorola. The remnants were acquired by Google recently. So I think the parallel there or the parable is, this is not unlike the dawn of the computer. Accountants that were doing T-sheets had to move to spreadsheets. The dawn of the internet, all of these companies failed to adopt it. I think AI is definitely there. This is a transformational technology. This is not fringe tech like crypto or blockchain. I don't care how much people like that. Only a fraction of the folks have actually worked with it. This is going to touch every person on earth, whether they want it or not. And so it's something that we need to weave into how we level up our staff and how we weave it into the fabric of, how we do business.
Love that. And a couple of things there. So first off, as a quick aside, Blockbuster, for those listening who don't remember it, I can always remember that feeling of going in when there was like a movie that had just come out, new release, and you'd go and they'd have like 50 copies on the wall. And I remember you'd have to like pick up the copy to see if there was the actual video that ran, and you'd go and they'd all be gone. You'd be like, oh my God. And you'd end up like renting some movie that you'd seen 3 times already because you're already there and you had to pick up one. Then they had rewinding fees and late fees. I mean, I miss a little bit of going to Blockbuster, picking up a candy, like, getting my movie, going home and watching it. But I don't miss any of the not being able to see what I want to see, the late fees and the rewinding. So, God bless you, Netflix, for coming in and doing what you did. In a lot of ways, but I think it's an excellent, comparison in terms of, the internet and the way that the technology diffused over time, right, to become now what it is today, where it's ubiquitous. It's not, we don't look at it as like, you don't have a chief internet officer. Like the internet is native to everything, every function does professionally. And that's not even talking about the consumer application of it. And so the interesting thing about the internet, though, is think back to 1997, right? And I've made this comparison before, but, it took time, right? Not everybody had access to the internet yet, right? The dial-up, right, was really tough and it would crash and you would lose. And then, so it wasn't like this consistent thing that you could do, right? Where you could buy things right away, right? Not everybody had access to it. And it started happening in pockets and pockets and pockets. And then eventually, right, it became ubiquitous. But the companies that got in early, the companies that understood the leverage that was going to come and how they would be able to reach consumers that they'd never been able to do, like a Netflix, like you mentioned, right? Or an iPhone. They are the ones that ended up changing the game and putting those other companies to bed because of their early adoption of it. So when I look at the context of what's happening right now is, you know, we're seeing a lot about, okay, well, oh, AI, the most amazing thing. It's going to be great. It's going to change the world. We're going to be on UBI. Well, then it stops. Then that hype cycle starts to go down and people realize that's not going to happen as soon as we think because Dario and Sam and these other technology leaders of the frontier models, right? Number one, they have a vested interest in talking about how this is going to change everything, right? That's number one. Number two, though, they're looking at things from a technology perspective. What is the technology capable? I have zero doubt that they've seen some things from an AGI or super intelligence perspective and where it's coming, where they can start to see the future and the vision. But as far as I know, Dario Amodei is not an economist, okay? And what they're not taking into account, you heard Sam Altman say this recently too, is there's some social implications. There's some change management implications. There's some policy and regulation implications. And there's some constraints like we're seeing now with energy, with data center build out, with, other things that are coming down the pipe that have allowed AI to start to we're seeing it now, but there's not a ton of ROI. Companies aren't getting you've heard the stories recently of $500 million in tokens spent with some Fortune 500 company that remains nameless. I would want to remain nameless too, if that was my organization, right? We've seen that Uber blasted through their budget in the first 4 months of the year that they had allocated for the year. We've seen Microsoft say, we're going to go away from using all these cloud tokens because they're spending too much money. So it's interesting to me, right, that we're going through this same thing we did with the internet, where we all kind of knew how the implications are important, but the actual use case, the actual ubiquity of it is still to come. And that to me is both somewhat scary, but also exciting, especially to be building in a time like this. So where I will take into account, right, and I'll wrap it up after this, what I will take into account is, yes, this technology can reinforcement learn and build on top of itself and do different things, right? But what is the difference between super intelligence and AGI? Is there a difference that we all agree on? What does it even mean if it's conscious thought? These are things that we still have yet to determine. And I think it's okay to say, we know this is big, we know this is impactful, but we still have to figure out where the use cases are going to happen, how fast they're going to happen, and what's going to change. And if you can bet on that and get it right, you're going to win big. And then again, this will really be the last thing I said. I'm a big love Naval Ravikant, right? Love reading his stuff. He's great as a thought leader. And he talks a lot about economics and reading about, foundationally go back to the basics of these things. Read Adam Smith, read these different things. So I literally have a book that I'm reading right now, basic of the basic economics it's called. I think it's was published in 1964 from what I can remember. And I'm literally reading it right this weekend. And there's a full chapter on the adoption of technology and how there's always people that say this is going to displace jobs and this is going to do all these different things. But historically, that has not been the case, whether it be with the Industrial Revolution, whether it be with the loom, whether it be with the car, and with the internet. Sometimes what people forget is, oh my God, retail stores are going away, right? Everything that we do person to person is going away. Well, guess what? The invention of the ATM, they're still bank tellers, right? Some of these things are the more they change, the more they stay the same. And I refuse to believe that as impressive as the technology AI is, that it'll be a completely different situation from what we've seen historically over the last 250 to 300 years with every new advent of technology. All right, I said a lot. Anything that you pick at or anything that you disagree with?
Look, I'll agree with most of what you said. Probably the majority of it, actually. What I do believe is going to happen is the job's going to shift, just like we saw with the internet native era, just like we saw with the computer native era. Yes, certain jobs go away. The typewriter, the memo, all of that, it gets digitized. And so in AI, I think what you're going to see is you're going to see the super powered individual contributor. And what I would argue is, when someone can truly embrace agentic AI, which is, the ability to delegate to, let's call it a director, and the director has a bunch of, sub agents that kind of go out and do these things for you. Effectively, what everybody becomes is a manager. And so the skill set of the future, my wife was actually asking me the other day, like, hey, we've got 5 kids. How do we prepare them for AI? There's 3 areas where I think it's AI resilient. And I definitely don't believe it's going to be plumbers and electricians and all of these, like welders. I think that's nonsense. And I'll go on a slight tangent here. When AI meets robotics, it's over.
So that
It's
stuff's
over
done.
because
It's so funny when
OSHA's not going to be okay.
electrician, certification. Guys, as soon as
100%.
strike happens, those jobs are going out the door. Now the
Yeah.
jobs change, but it's just the task-driven jobs, to your point, that are going to be displaced, and there is going to be some short disruption. But to your point, relational things where you have oversight. Now, go ahead. Why don't you say the three qualities?
No, you're spot on. I mean, those jobs are not protected because of robotics. But what I would say is protected are relational. People still want to relate. Nobody wants to buy something from AI. If you find out you're talking to a bot on a website, you get a little irked. Or you're talking to the IVR, you're like, agent. You're really trying to get to a person. So what I leaned into with my kids is I more or less just said, hey, become salespeople, become entrepreneurs, because that is always going to be ever present. I do believe that AI is going to supercharge the individual contributor, like I said, and make us all managers. So the skill set that folks ask me, like the people going into college, or, hey, how do I reinvent myself when I'm, when I think my skill set's getting ready to get, displaced by AI, is I tell them, learn how to manage a process, become a process manager. And there's plenty of those folks in business. I mean, ADT, we have millions of processes. And there were always champions that owned those processes, and they knew the nooks and crannies of every single aspect of how the workflow and state management worked. That is the future, because I believe that we're going to see an acceleration on a level that we've never seen. That the curve is just going to go insane, and I'm excited about it because I'm a technologist and an innovator. I'm looking forward to the innovation in medicine, longevity, space exploration, things that we just can't wrap our brains around, that AI is going to be able to detect and really kind of get us over some hurdles very, very quickly because of its context windows and its ability to look at things quickly. So yes, you're right. The jobs are going to change. I think the problem that we as leaders, and you as, kind of like, and I'll just say it, part of your business is an undigitized marketplace. You're a talent shop, right? You've got all these folks on one side, you've got all these customers on the other. You're a card carrying member. It's easier for you to become a marketplace than someone to do a cold start and try to displace you, because you already have, all of the ingredients to do so. You've done it with Aeon, right? That is a true marketplace. It's a digitized one that's, obviously held together by AI. But, I think that is really where we end up. Is
compound on what you just said, because I think it's a really important point. I'm gonna go back, because I like the analogy of like, what would you tell your kids to do? And you've got 5, I got 4. Between the two of us, we could put together a starting baseball team. So we got a lot on our plates. But I tell them, and I really believe this, there's 2 things I would say. 1, whatever you pursue, be exceptional at it. And I'll get back to that in a second. Yep. 2, be adaptable to technology and change. And here's what I mean by that. I still think it matters to be in the top 2%, 3% of pretty much any discipline right now that AI is going to fundamentally change. But if you are an expert in that space, okay, you're going to fundamentally understand it, to your point of somebody who's doing a cold start versus somebody who's been doing talent acquisition for 20 years. There's zero chance that is not still an advantage and going to be something that's going to that's going to allow for you to build and do bigger and greater things. Like the 10x, we're seeing the 10x developer turn into the 100x developer. But what's getting watched out a lot? Maybe more junior developers who aren't using AI, or mediocre developers. Yeah, I really believe that's the case. But the exceptional, you think me coming out and trying to vibe code something next to Andrej Karpathy, who knows more about development than I know on anything in any subject, is gonna, because I have AI, I'm now at the same level as him? BS. Totally not true. And so that's what I think. Expertise in your discipline is important. Just know how technology is going to fundamentally change it, and be out in front of that, and you're going to be okay. Now, you're going to be more than okay. You're going to be in a really good spot. So let's stop there, because I just brought up coding, and this is what they call in the business. So let's run it. Coding has gone from people building interesting apps through vibe coding to the best developer in the world at companies big and small, spending literally billions on tokens, like I brought up earlier. Many of them just speaking and watching high quality code appear line after line. That's a relatively new phenomenon. And really, if I can think about the timeline where it feels like that really hit, sounds like Christmas time. And then as we really got to the beginning of the year, what changed? What's made things escalate so quickly, specifically in that coding space?
Well, I blame Cursor. I have a chart when I'm walking executives through like the AI boom. It started in the 50s and now, of course, generative AI kind of like made it hockey stick. But if you look at the last, 4 years, Cursor's really been, in my mind, the organization that really put, let's just say generative code on the map. They did something brilliant. They took an open source platform, which was Visual Studio Code. It was kind of like the IDE every developer used, and they embedded a chat client in it. I'm baffled that Microsoft didn't acquire them before, of course, X and Elon Musk, had a lockup on them. So, for me, Cursor had 3 booms, right? Its first boom was obviously embedding it. Its models were way better than Copilot. And, you actually got decent autocorrect. I call that kind of like phase 1 or 2 of AI maturity with respect to developers. Now, Cursor's gone into this mode where they have agent mode only. You're not even living in the IDE anymore. You're in their proprietary interface and you're just prompting. And that to me is really level 3. It's prompt engineering. And to me, that's like 300%. That's a massive boom. That's the 3X developer. That's taking everybody who, used to be a junior developer or a pretty good mid-grade developer and 3Xing all of their output. That's fantastic. As long as they know what they're doing, you're going to get some real value out of that. The third boom is when they do agentic. And that's when they're doing sub-agents. They're experimenting with that right now. It's starting to work. I obviously built my entire website over the last 2 weeks with Cursor, and it looks phenomenal. I mean, I'm blown away. And I'm let's call it a UX and UI, how do I say it? Yes, I have very, very high standards. It's done a great job. And with that, I think we're at this new era where UI is more or less taken care of. It's really going to be at the speed of thought. And as a matter of fact, as an aside, Bill Gates wrote a book in 1999 called Business at the Speed of Thought. I read it and I was like, okay, yeah, this is interesting. But I was like, when's this actually going to happen? Right now. Like now is when business is going to happen at the speed of thought because, executives like you and I, gray hairs, if you will, that know where all the bodies are buried. We know how to create value. AI in our hands is incredibly powerful. And to your point, the card carrying members who actually have a lot of experience have this massive advantage as long as they get comfortable with AI tools. I think the biggest misnomer that I get from the younger generation is they say, hey, Ryan, I need you to teach me, how do I learn AI? And I said, that's not what you need to focus on. I'm telling her, you need to become an expert at something. I don't care if it's My Little Pony, fintech, logistic, you become like an expert, like super deep, read like ridiculously detailed nuances within your craft, and then use AI tools. Because then you're invaluable. You're an expert that can wield an AI tool to actually do what you want. Case in point, I had a client that asked ChatGPT on a leadership call to kind of settle an argument, a basic question that more or less said, hey, do we need a license for X? And, that answer, came back very generically saying, yeah, we think you do. And it was very expensive. And I was on the call and I said, I think the question was wrong. I told him, I said, can we rephrase it with this context? And we rephrased it. And ChatGPT goes, wow, that is a very sophisticated question. With that setup, you don't need those licenses. They're unnecessary because you fall outside of the requirements. And so, we avoided probably $150,000 worth of licensing that, plus whatever time it took to actually become licensed in that. So, it's those nuances, it's those details that make you valuable. And back to the speed of thought business part with Bill Gates's book, we're at that era where, you can dream up whatever you want. You could rebuild an entire CRM, a logistics platform or whatever at the speed of thought if you're an expert, if you know how to build that.
Finding the right talent for your team doesn't have to be a struggle. Meet Aeon Hire, the world's first hiring experience management platform designed to transform the way you hire. Powered by AI, Aeon Hire takes the hassle out of every step in the process. From smart resume analysis to customized interview questions, it saves you time, money, and effort. Plus, With real-time insights from every interview, you can quickly identify top candidates, reduce turnover, and stay on budget. And forget about note-taking, Aeon Hire takes care of that for you. Ready to revolutionize your hiring process? Visit aeonhire.com and get started today.
I've talked about this before. If we ask my Claude instance, which I'm addicted to, might be the wrong word, but co-work, I use that a lot. It's become a big part of my flow and what I do, and I'm hyper productive because of it. Or somebody's ChatGPT or somebody's, Gemini, whatever it may be. Okay. If I ask the exact same question and you ask the exact same question, we're probably going to get two different outputs, right? Okay. And the way that works. And a lot of that is because of the memory, because of the context, because of the skills that we built, because of, all the different things that we have that uniquely make our LLM us, and that understands us and can do things in our voice, in our knowledge base, and etc. In my mind, that is similar to what you just talked about from asking the right questions, which goes back also to what you said about the UX UI. My intellectual property is now built into my LLM, and the outputs of my LLM become stronger and better and more customized to what I care about and what I need because of it. So thus, when I come to your company and I bring my LLM, it's different than yours, right? And I also think that the taste you have for what not just you like from a UI UX perspective, but everybody would like, is something very unique and different. To be able to ascertain that and understand that and articulate that and see that and know it when you have it. These are the different things that become the advantages. Now, if you really think about it, it's not that different than it was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, where my brain came to your company and I actually did X, Y, Z because I executed and did all these different things. Now I'm just bringing a more supercharged brain. And if you have agents, actually the ability to execute. And that's what I think where this is all going. Me and my agents and maybe my specialized large language model that I've built that's my own and that's housed on my own proprietary database, whatever it may be, well, who knows where this goes? That becomes your asset. That becomes your advantage. And so then it comes back to what you just talked about being exceptional at something and then being able to leverage the technology to take it from being able to make this much of an impact alone to be able to make this much of an impact. And that's where I see things going. So to me, I guess I just want to push back on this idea of democratization through AI. Hey, guess what, buddy? If you're mediocre today, AI is only going to make you, and it's going to highlight your mediocrity. If you're exceptional today, it's going to take it to the next level. And that's what I always would tell my team and tell my kids is that focus on being great. Being great never goes out of style, always pays. And even in a world where we're, on UBI playing harps, on the grass fields, being exceptional is still going to matter. I know it is. Okay. So that's where I stand there. Let's talk about the agents. You mentioned LLMs are somewhat commoditized previously, and we're seeing so much happen with these agents right now. How do you define an agent? And what are you seeing in the tech world with this? Where do agents go from here? And I say this for some of our listeners that are like, what is all this talk about agents? Are we talking about Jerry Maguire? Like, help me understand what is an agent at a base level? And then let's talk about where things are going and why they're so powerful.
Well, an agent in my mind, and again, I dabbled. I built an app that works with agents and stuff, but agents in my mind really are, units of program that have very specific instructions and guardrails that are generally specialized. So for instance, I created an agentic framework to build a platform. I created a front-end agent, and the guardrails I gave it is I said, hey, you've got to use this front end, right? So Next.js. And I said, we want to have a specific design ethos. So we're going to use Shade CN, which is kind of like a Material UI type competitor. And then I built a middleware agent that just builds APIs. And lastly, I had a data architect agent. Now, I tied all of these together with what I called like my almost CTO or director of engineering agent that I would only tell that agent what to do, and then it would delegate to the other ones. Now, there's interesting parts about these agents. Why not just say to ChatGPT or Claude, hey, build me the front end, build me the middleware, and build me the data architecture? Well, it goes to the same issue you have with a person who's a jack of all trades. You're going to get something, but it's probably not going to be best in class in any of those disciplines. And so when you have the agent only focused on what they do the best, then you're going to get the best output because they put all their horsepower, all of their knowledge base into that research, and all the context is limited to that. if they're doing a bunch of context switching, like trying to build front end and build APIs and build the back end, you're going to get exactly what you think you're going to get. And so for me, agents allow you to isolate, the work to the specialty. So it's almost like employing a bunch of specialists. And to me, that's super powerful, because by really ring fencing all of that specialized knowledge and context, you get really high quality output that you wouldn't get with the generalist model, if you will.
You know what we call that today? A high performing company. A high performing company is what? Just a bunch of specialists coming together in their domains for a central goal, right? A North Star goal, right? Having revenue, profitability, whatever it may be, right? Now we're able to do that at the individual level. And this is what people talk about, more entrepreneurs and democratization of your own companies and doing these different things in billion-dollar unicorns, because, I do believe that there is some capability of using these specialized agents. And the way that I've heard, agents defined is system or workflow plus harness equals agents.
Yep.
And that's exactly what it is, right? You put in those guardrails like you talked about. You have the flow in the system. The agent is specialized in a specific area, and then the agents can work together to bring a broader output together, right? Is pretty much exactly what you said. And that's where I think, again, it goes back to this idea of specialization and knowledge base and things like that. Because I'll say, you know what, everybody listening to this, go ahead and say, go to your chat GPT, go to your cloud, whatever it is. If you're using Opus, if you're using, the latest model, go say, write me a viral X post that will get, 1 million likes, the most viral post of all time. Everybody go do that. Watch what post it gives you, go post it and see if it becomes the most viral post of all time. The levels of these things change when everybody has access to them. And now there becomes a new differentiator. And that's just really what it is. I think it's going to level up a lot of things in a lot of ways. And those agents, like you said, whoever can build, I'll give you an example. One thing that we're talking about, I want to be somewhat high level about this, but we have this capability called Aeon Source. And there's a lot of, there's human intervention now on this big human center of excellence that we've built over the last 15, 16 years, where you put me up against anybody, I think we source better than any company. And that's why I think we have the recruiting outcomes that we typically do. Well, what did we do? We started looking at what our team has done that makes them so unique and special, what they do differently than maybe other sourcing individuals do or other recruiters might do. And we started to build that into a eval, which eventually becomes an agentic flow. And there's some level of agentic flow that we're already building right now that is taking a lot of the administrative burden off of the humans. But eventually, we know where this goes, right? It becomes an agent that ultimately is specialized for healthcare sourcing or
100%
automotive sourcing or this kind of. And now I've created this very unique thing that works for me. And now I go and I say, hey, staffing company, you can use this and get this same output, right? And that becomes, again, this is where the taste making, the understanding, the specialization, the depth and expertise in your space becomes a differentiator, right? And so I love it. I think you gave a good breakdown there. Let's talk about this, okay? We talked about how...
do you mind if I comment real quick?
Jump it.
Okay. I have to say, Oz, I'm a customer. My clients are customers of Aeon. The first time I saw it work, it was magic. I mean, one of those products where I go, whoa, that is cool. It did a great job at helping us source, product managers, engineers, an architect, and, again, truly a magical product. I think any staffing agency and or, even LinkedIn to an extent is at risk for a product like that. That's AI native. So
more coming. And I know we're going to breakout video coming here. I would say that Aeon doesn't sponsor this podcast. It unfortunately does, but I appreciate you saying that, brother. And you have used it and you have recommended it. I really, really appreciate you saying that. And I would tell you, this is just the beginning of where we're going. But again, it goes back to expertise with great technologists and great product team. And this is how you build something that hopefully is really special and does something great, which again, did it again. We got a great segue right here. So we talked about this. You brought up kind of Sears and Blockbuster and how once the internet proliferated, they failed to adapt and eventually got wiped out by the internet native companies like Amazon and Netflix. So this is my favorite question. I got to ask you, what industry or companies do you see being at risk of being the Blockbuster to an AI native company's Netflix?
Oh, some of
Probably every industry at some level, but like what are ones that you're seeing right now that you think are some of the earliest potential cases for this?
I mean, the organizations that are really digging their heels in, and trying to stick to their laurels. I mean, I hate to pick on certain companies, but, you know, I would argue some of the automotive companies are at risk, especially with the electric vehicle companies coming out, and more or less those are computers. I mean, a Tesla is now a computer, and their valuation on the market reflects that. They're $1 trillion company. Uh, I think some of the old guard manufacturers, like think about it, SpaceX is popping up. It's obviously led by Elon Musk, but you've got a forward thinking person that really thinks from a first principles that's building this. What happens to the Boeings? What happens to the Lockheed Martins? What happens to the, previous satellite and rocket, engineering companies? GE, I mean, DuPont, these companies are unfortunately kind of falling by the way of Motorola. I'm just watching their valuations dwindle every day, and that's consumer sentiment. That's investor sentiment. They're effectively shifting those dollars into these companies that are rocket ships. And once interest wanes and their product is less of a commodity, or they get rolled up, for me, I think those are the ones that are at risk. If I have to kind of pick on named companies, but industries in general, what I think is the biggest risk are I just wrote an article about this today and posted it on LinkedIn, but I think the biggest risk are organizations that say, hey, AI is technology. I should give this to my CIO. I'm not flaming CIOs. Look, they're measured on something totally different than the business. They're usually measured on, hey, uptime, keeping cyber attacks out, making sure that, the internet's secure, those kinds of things. They're not tasked with revenue generation. Now, there might be some weird hybrid roles that exist, but generally that's a CDO, chief digital officer, or maybe a CTO that also has product under their belt. So I think the biggest mistake an organization can make right now is to take AI and say, ooh, this looks and feels like technology. Let's give it to the CIO. Because the first thing they're going to say is, whoa, I don't want anybody using this. There's massive risk, IP leakage, all of that good stuff. And imagine the world where at the dawn of the internet era, your CIO or your technologist comes out and says, I'm going to unplug the internet because, there's a risk of a hack. Yeah, that's a risk. But the bigger risk is not capitalizing on the business opportunity that the internet presented, right? And so I think there's a controlled world where a business owner owns AI and they're able to kind of get it out there. But at the end of the day, the CIO and all of your technologists, CISO and CISO, I guess what you call it, they sit on the committee that kind of manages and directs some of that. But someone who owns revenue and product creation ought to really own it internally and figure out how to weave it into the fabric of how you do business. Because if your organization's not on track to 3 to 5 to 10x your workforce with AI, you're going to fall behind. I mean, then you're going to have the same thing that happened with Sears, with, Amazon, and Blockbuster with Netflix. There will be an AI company that pops up. People will pillory it just like they did Jeff Bezos, making fun of them for trying to sell books online. Yeah, the joke's on them. One of the richest men in the world now.
Brilliantly stated. All right. I got a lot to go with here. I'm going to get on my soapbox for a second. So let's talk about this. So a couple of different things I would say in conjunction with what you just said. So
Yeah.
One, do you know of any companies that have a chief internet officer or a chief computer officer? You don't. It doesn't
No.
exist. Okay.
No.
DMO is expected to understand digital marketing and its capability.
Yeah.
Finance team is expected to be able to understand how you can share, your GL and your accounting and your Excel through your cloud and different things like that. Okay. It is ubiquitous to what we do. Now, does the CIO deploy the computers?
Yeah.
Do they have governance around really what you can use in a computer, what internet provider you use? For sure, that makes sense to me as from an AI perspective. But in terms of, here's the big risk, in my opinion, that I don't think people are thinking about when it comes to this. So I'll give you an example in my world that I know very well. Every hiring manager I know thinks they're amazing at hiring, and the data does not back that up. And you know what I think one of the biggest reasons and problems for that is because corporate organizations, as they built themselves, have made it HR's responsibility.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? HR is going to handle that. I don't need to handle that. They'll get that. They'll provide the candidates. They'll tell me about the employee value proposition. They'll construct my interview process. They'll tell me what technology to use. And then, I'll make the decision type of thing, right? Well, guess what? We haven't gotten any better at hiring because of that. We haven't looked at it as native to our job or as part of our, if I'm a manager, I would tell you 50% of your job is the level of talent you bring onto your team and then how you develop and retain them at least, if not more. So when you outsource it and say, this is the function of HR that's going to manage talent acquisition for me, which I'm not saying is the wrong thing. They should definitely be involved and put guidelines and principles, and there's different things that should happen there. But ultimately, it is the responsibility of the function and the functional leaders. And that should be the case with AI as well. Because if you have a marketing team or a finance team that says, IT is doing my AI strategy, AI, they're making the decision for me on AI, good luck. Then you're going to be Blockbuster. Really, really, really believe that. So I think it's a much more toxic thing than people even realize, right? Because they're just everyone's trying to get their hands around it. It's like, oh, it's technology. We put it in technology's hands. And I'm not saying that's always the wrong answer, but I think more often than not empowering your business and then giving them governance and giving them what type of technology and the choices and things like that. But that can be happening in IT. But I firmly believe that how you use it, the way you use it, the workflows you use it has to come from your business. If not, you're going to get subpar and mediocre results. You're going to get passed by. That's for sure. The other thing I would say is, okay, when I look at the companies that you mentioned, okay, it's the innovator dilemma. It's incumbent versus insurgent. And here's the problem. You're playing defense because you have this stock price and you have a public listing and you have a shareholder. And here's why, if I'm betting, so you're hearing a lot about the SaaS apocalypse right now. These software companies are in trouble because I can vibe code and do these things. Yeah, listen, I think there's some truth to that from a market share perspective, but I think it's completely overblown. And particularly for founder-led software companies like, say, a Salesforce, okay?
Yeah.
Or look at Meta, okay? You know why? Because founders are the ones that are most likely to rip off the legacy way of thinking, the way that we've made money, right? And go in a new direction because they know it. Going back to your actual analogy, right, of Netflix. Remember what Netflix did before they did streaming? They were sending, right? They were disrupting Blockbuster by sending DVDs to your house rather than you having to go to Blockbuster and pick it out. So that was one form of disruption. But that was like, I think, $100 million business for them. That was like their primary revenue source. And they completely shuttered it and said, we're going in this direction, all in. And guess where Netflix is now? Was that a good decision? It was a damn good decision. You know who can't make those decisions a lot of the time? Public company CEOs that are not founders, that have not come in. And I'm not railing against those people, but they just a lot of times don't even have the juice or the cojones a lot of time to do the thing that's going to cannibalize your current business so that you can be in the way forward, which is why many of these companies are absolutely at risk. And why? There's going to be new kingmaker. There's like new AI is a kingmaker, right? There's going to be new companies come up that build and do things that are going to change the game. And it's because they were nimble and they were risky and they were willing to move. And that's why Elon is amazing, right? I agree with him or not. What I respect about him is I believe he's a principled person. And I believe he's always looking at first principles and he's always willing to look down the road and change and move on. And listen, you brought up Tesla a minute ago. Outside of, in fact, including Claude and co-work and the different things I've done from an AI perspective, you know how I got here today? Self-driving. I got a Tesla. It's the most amazing software on the planet. I can't believe it. It's incredible. I use it all the time. It's one of my favorite things ever. I know I said a lot there, but yeah, man, I think you're so on it. I think you're spot on. We're going to put your LinkedIn article in the show notes so people can take a look at it themselves and get a little bit of knowledge from Ryan Lee.
Yeah, it'd be great. I mean, just commenting on what you're saying, you're spot on. I think, to your point, the public companies are the biggest ones at risk because of what I call the quarterly death mark. They literally have to go and answer to investors, and they've got this such a short cycle to deliver on, which more or less means that they can't think in terms of 3, 5, 10 years. I think, Apple is the exception to that rule. When I worked there, it was interesting because it was very clear we were putting ourselves out of business every cycle. Think about it, right? There's a new iPhone coming out every single cycle. As soon as one drops, the next one's already in development, which means that one's obsolete. Now, again, at the product life cycle. But, organizations really need to be able to feel comfortable with setting up what I call these little Navy SEAL teams that can go out and build the product that is going to put their cash cow out of business. And the internal politics of that are generally what stops it, because, the leaders and the executives that have control of that revenue line, they want to protect it because it gives them a lot of political power. And so they generally will go in and kill new initiatives because that, of course, takes power away from them. And to your point, these organizations need to become the innovator. They need to realize that, hey, our entire business model is at risk. We need to be able to diversify quickly. And the beauty about AI, and I'll even use startup analogies. In startup land, you used to have to maniacally focus on building one thing. It was just like, you have to build this one little widget that solved some massive problem. And then you could go viral and you get your $100 million mark. And then, of course, you're a $1 billion unicorn. I don't think that's going to be the case anymore. I think what's going to happen is investors are going to do micro investments in founders that have great ideas. They're experts in their field and they've found some kind of problem they can solve. And instead of the founder hiring an engineering team and spending $5 million in 18 months trying to build a proof of concept, what you do is you build 4 or 5 proofs of concept within a month, and you're able to go out and try to commercialize it. And I think the winner becomes the one that goes to market and gets it out there. And the beauty is the cost of the innovation, the cost of building that technology almost goes to the floor. Exactly. And to your
By the
point,
way, Trevon's paradox, demand goes up, right?
100%.
The need and goes up, which again is another, quiver in the arrow in the quiver. Is that right?
Yeah.
Why this doom apocalypse type scenario is not there? To your point, there'll be disruption, there will be changes, there will be jobs that go away, but overall, the demand is going to go up, right? And that means the cost is going to go down, demand is going to go up, and it's going to be an exciting time. I know that there's going to be change, there's going to be differences, just like with the internet, social media. People hate on it, but there's a lot of good things it does. There's a lot of things that you can find on the internet that are not great, that you wouldn't want your kids to see, right? Would we get rid of the internet? No, there's downsides with everything. You break eggs with every omelet you have to make, but we all should understand that. And this is what I'm saying to every American listening to this right now. Be an AI optimist, be on board, join the train, be part of the change, be excited about it. Yes, of course, there's going to be bad things, but try to look at it from a perspective of all the great that's going to happen because of it. And you're more likely to be part of the success and the good thing. I wouldn't resist the change, right? I really appreciated you coming on, man. When people ask me who knows the most about payments and payment systems, I think of Ryan Lee. When they ask me about who knows the most about marketplaces, I think of Ryan Lee. When I think about who would I say should advise your company on what you should do from an AI strategy perspective, I think of Ryan Lee. So I'm so appreciative of you coming on, brother. I know if you didn't learn something in this episode, someone's wrong with you. So I appreciate you coming on, man, and sharing with us. Thanks so much for spending time with us.
Thank you, boss.
Talk to you.